Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the SC20 After Hours session, What's Brewing in Life Sciences, a Birds of a Feather event, streaming live from the Lazarus Brewing Company in Austin, Texas. This BOF is hosted by Adam Marko, Director of Life Sciences Solutions at Panasas. I'm Bob Murphy at Panasas in San Diego, and I will be your moderator today. I'll be fielding your questions to the BOF panel. And remember, you are in the BOF too, so questions and comments are welcome and encouraged. Okay. Adam has prepared an entertaining session where he and other thought leaders in life sciences take you on a tour through the ins and outs of the beer making process while you gain insights into the trends bubbling to the surface in Life Sciences HPC. The panel members are Ari Berman, CEO of BioTeam, Beaver, VP Americas for BioSci, Earl Dodd, HPC Alchemist at Worldwide Technologies, Kevin Tubbs, SVP Strategic Solutions Group at Penguin Computing, Adam, of course, and then the group is joined by two very special guests, Matt Couch, the Brewmaster at Lazarus Brewing Company in Austin, where the event is taking place in obviously a socially distanced environment, and Christian von Heide, the CEO of the Siebel Institute of Technology, the oldest brewing school in the Americas, and he was previously at Guinness and Augustiner. Due to the social distance logistics, each panel member will speak for 5 minutes, and then we'll have the BOF discussion with audience questions after that. I'll be capturing your questions from you if they come up during their presentations. But before we begin, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. This session will be recorded and available on demand once SC20 concludes. For the best viewing experience, we recommend using a wired internet connection and closing any programs or browser sessions running in the background that could cause issues. These live sessions are bandwidth intensive, so closing any unnecessary browser tabs will help conserve your bandwidth. Please submit your questions through the QA panel located at the bottom of your screen. We will try to answer all your questions during the session, but if a fuller answer is needed, or if we run out of time, we will answer them later via email. And for those of you just joining us, welcome. We are about to start the SC20 After Hours session, What's Brewing in Life Sciences? And now I'll turn it over to Adam Marko. Adam.
I'll actually get you guys off. Yeah. So hi, everybody. My name is Matt Couch. I am the brewmaster at Lazarus Brewing Company, as Bob introduced me.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, I forgot. Matt is actually doing work today, so he has to talk first. And
yeah, I got
blew that. Yeah. So he's got to go and make some beer. So why don't you spotlight on that, Irene?
Yeah. So as Bob said, I am the brewmaster here. Just a little background about me. I was trained in England. I am an IBD diploma graduate. So came to Austin, Texas after working at a very large brewery in Pennsylvania and helped start up this brewery in particular. So I'm going to walk you guys briefly through the brewing process. And we relate a ton with life sciences because everything we really deal with is living. And in some cases, we kill it on purpose, and sometimes we try to keep it alive as long as we possibly can. So we generally start with a grain. As a single grain, it's a seed. So it's still alive, and it's in a state we call dormant. And it's basically waiting for its chance to grow. And what we do is we add water to that and put it in a certain temperature in which that seed starts to actually develop like it's actually going to create a plant. And we get those enzymes that are actually stored in that actual grain to go ahead and start converting starch to sugar. So we really rely on that particular grain to do its job. We do crush it so that we can expose that seed and expose that starch to the enzymes that grain holds, which is the milling and mashing process on that diagram that you guys see in the first slide. And then once we actually get that process to start with water and grain together, we basically have oatmeal that we have to extract the liquid, and the liquid that comes off of that oatmeal is sugar water. So we take that sugar water and we have to sterilize it. So we go to the next step, which is boiling. When we boil it, we're actually doing a couple things there. We're sterilizing it first and foremost, but we're also creating reactions in that heat-driven reactions that basically do the same thing as if you're making anything in your skillet where you have sugar added. It darkens it and it makes it brown and it gives it like a caramel character. We do that as well in the same process. So we add flavor that way. This is where we add hops, which are a living plant, very, very hard to kill plant, honestly. It's very, very potent. But the product of that plant is a little bud that carries along these oils and these flavor compounds that in beer, you get all of these very complex, different flavors depending on which hops you're using. So things like grapefruit, herbal, floral, things that taste and smell like geranium, and then earthy components, some woody components, even very closely related to hemp, and sometimes those taste like that as well. So we add those during the boil as well. And what we're really doing through this whole process is preparing this liquid to be consumed by yeast in the future. So that's where whirlpooling, which is the next step in the process, comes in. We want to take all of the starch and protein that didn't actually go into solution out of the liquid. And in whirlpooling, we separate it very gently. So we spin that liquid, everything dense comes to the center and drops out of solution. We pull the liquid away from that point, and we get this very clear sugar water that we have at about 212 degrees. Now we have a problem here. We have a very, very hot liquid in which yeast cannot survive because yeast doesn't like to function or survive in anything greater than 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So we have to cool that down, and we need to do it very quickly. Otherwise, bad stuff starts coming back into that liquid that was in there in the first place. So we use what we call a heat exchanger for the most part. This is generally standard. And through that process, we run the sugar water through the heat exchanger while cold water or a cold medium of some kind goes against the grain in reverse flow. And what this does is cools that liquid on its way to a fermenter. Now the fermenting vessel is very structurally designed in which we can add that cooled sugar water with oxygen for the yeast to actually multiply in. And that vessel is specifically designed to house this sugar water and allow that yeast to do a very specific job. Now, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, we will usually pitch yeast either from brand new or from another fermentation at a rate of about 10 million yeast cells per milliliter. So if you imagine one of these vessels holds 310 gallons, that's about 2,400 some liters, then multiply that by 1,000, it's a lot of yeast. And that yeast starts to replicate. And what we do is watch that replication, monitor that, and as that yeast replicates, it hits a certain point of maximum replication, which is limited by the oxygen we add, and then it ferments because it's out of oxygen. So what the yeast does is tries to survive any way it possibly can. It starts consuming sugar. It starts consuming a lot of proteins, free amino nitrogens, a lot of trace metals, and it creates alcohol and CO2. So basically, it's burping out CO2 and basically peeing out alcohol. That's the general gist. And it's trying to survive.
I can relate.
Yeah. So if you ever consume enough alcohol, you know how that feels. But so basically, from that process, we have beer. Everything before that is called wort. Now we have beer. We basically filter it, make it clear, carbonate it, and we send it out to you. So that's a very fast and loose process, but life is everything we do, and we're basically herd managers. So when you think of brewing, know that we're basically herd managers of yeast, and that's what we do for a living. And with that, Bob, I'll turn it back to you if you want to go to the next slide.
Okay, thank you very much. Matt, that was awesome. I'll pitch it over to Adam. You want me to pitch it over to Ari? This is his slide.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us here. Happy to be at a brewery for the first time in a while. It's great. And I love Lazarus. And so thank you all for hosting it. I'm Ari Berman. I'm CEO of BioTeam. And we seem to have lost the slide there.
I know, I just wanted them to see you as you were talking. I gotta like take the slide down and
Sure, yeah.
I'll put it back up now. Yep.
Just real quickly, if you have no idea who we are, because that's likely, we are a scientific computing, life science, and healthcare consulting company specializing in HPC, cloud environments, full stack development, et cetera. So our whole goal is to make science go faster so that we can enable more cures. So Adam challenged us to come up with one slide that was either interesting or informative, and so this is what I came up with. And so in the midst of SC, where we're talking about, you know, supercomputing and algorithms and all of that, one of the recurring things that's coming up all the time now, and has been for the last few years, is data itself. And one of the things that I think needs to change, and this is probably going to be a foundational shift in how we do computing, is basically we've been doing everything compute-centric for the whole of history. We build a cluster, we attach some storage to it, you know, we throw more storage in the cloud, we you know, make the storage work for the compute that we have. You know, maybe you have a little array of drives on your workstation in your office or something like that. That's compute-centric. The problem is that now data is becoming so large and so central to all processes. You start bringing in something like machine learning, and where you have to have very clean, concise, well-annotated data in order to train your model so that you can make use of them. You know, you really have to have data in focus. And especially in life sciences, since some organizations like NIH are producing about 3 petabytes of data per week on campus right now, we really have to be able to wrangle that data well. So if you reorganize the way we're thinking so that data is actually at the center of that model, and you attach specialized computing architectures like cloud or sort of a general purpose HPC or a GPU cluster or some other capability, supercomputing device that all share the same data resources on some level, then what you've done is change the center of gravity so that computing is far more elastic than it was before. And so that means that if we do something like that, it's a more modular world. It may mean the demise of monolithic homogeneous HPC systems and you know, more systems specialized to specialized workloads. And really the focus is on building the data architectures that allow the science to get done. And so that's my how.
Great, Bob, you can go to the next slide, and that's Ray Beaver over here.
Okay. How's that?
Looks good. Appreciate it.
Okay.
My slide will tie in a little bit with what Ari mentioned from a solution. My name's Ray Beaver with BIOS IT, not to be confused with BioTeam, but we're a global IT solution house specializing in HPC infrastructure and solution development. Fortunately and unfortunately, I've got an example here of a solution that we put together for a large genomics lab that ties into the issue we're in with the mask and COVID outreach. So this example ties into a public-private type scenario where do you want to go public cloud or private cloud, on-prem, traditional, that type of scenario. What we did here is we've got a large genomics lab doing about 100,000 genomes, and they need to progress up to about 5 million. Their move was to the public cloud in order to get quick compute, quick storage, as we all know, and have easy access to it. But when they're doing 24/7 data and modeling, it becomes quite expensive to do this. And so the key was we wanted to bring it back down in-house to their facility. In order to do this, we leveraged our cloud stack and pulled their data back down in-house with a cluster labeled their cluster 1, where we essentially snapshotted all their imaging, brought a line-for-line copy of their public cloud offering back down to new hardware. This allowed for no downtime with their thousands of users. They could still leverage everything in-house and just point the SSH to a different head node in the cluster, and made it real easy for them to leverage that. We then moved to wanting to upgrade a lot of their OS infrastructure to the latest and greatest versions along with their applications. So we created another cluster, cluster 2, and moved the people that wanted the latest and greatest over to cluster 2, kept the people that want to stay on their legacy type environment and our cloud stack on cluster 1, and then slowly started migrating them. Along this time, we created a cluster 3, which is not really in order to tie in the containerization, which is our key here. Is we don't want to pigeonhole them into another on-prem type solution where you're stuck where you can't go public or private or on-prem. So here we containerize everything, and then we make it beneficial so that we can do bursting, because you're going to leverage on-prem and you're going to need bursting. When you're doing your 24/7 data crunching with all your data sets and leveraging all your custom APIs and software, you're still going to need bursting to the cloud. So we've integrated all that in-house into their solution where they could burst if they needed. Tying into some of what Ari mentioned as well, some of the high-end workstations that are needed and the virtualization side of that. You virtualize a lot of these 4K systems with vGPU type scenarios where you can leverage these high core count GPUs across and leverage Spark and those type of scenarios on the GATK to crunch these genomes and present these workstations to users. Out of this as well becomes a use case where people it's usability, right? So you get used to using the public cloud offering where it's easy to create hardware infrastructure, networking, and those type of things. In this type scenario, we have that same user portal that allows the researchers to continue to create their infrastructure, launch their clusters with an easy type interface that makes it simple for them to do without having to go back and pull all their Linux commands and the things they've done in the past. So in this type of scenario, we're not, we want to keep everybody using an on-prem solution, but still be able to leverage the public offering, containerize the system so they're easy portable, leveraging some Kubernetes and stuff like that to leverage the AI machine learning in order to burst internal and leverage these type of facilities. And on top of that, from this type of solution, you become, we end up being about a 5 times cost savings over a public cloud offering and bringing it in-house and still leveraging all the APIs and infrastructure. So.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Ray. Bob, I believe Earl Dodd's next. Oh my God. Come on down. I can't even read my slide.
Hey, neither can I. I said, yeah. I think you were told 1 slide, so you put like 5 slides on 1 slide. I know that trick.
I'm just wondering about, if I keep drinking this, what I do about bursting. So
that's right.
Okay, that's what's going on with me. Okay, so thank you very much. I'm Earl Dodd, and I'm part of WWT Worldwide Technology, and we're a very large value-added reseller systems integrator, roughly $13 billion this year, over 7,000 folks worldwide, et cetera. And I've been given the opportunity to lead and expand the high-performance computing HPC business practice there. So I'm in hog heaven where I'm at right now. So we've been talking about hunting and everything else. Now we talk about life sciences. And by the way, I really like life sciences. This is really good. Okay, this is good stuff. I'm almost empty. So there's several, trends going on, and we keep talking about these trends. Data is everywhere. One of the things I think that's going on that most people don't realize is data and the data acceleration is growing way faster than ever anticipated. I mean, you see these different reports from IDC and others that there are 170 zettabytes and things like that. I think that's underestimated for the first part, okay? And what that tells me, though, is even though as that keeps growing, our utilization or the amount of stranded data in there is worse. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And so being able to leverage that and how to make it useful. So what I spend most of my time from the HPC side, and by the way, to me, AI, big data, HPC, same coin, different side. It doesn't matter to me. I see a lot of workflows with AI in the front, pre-processing, post-processing, a little bit of visualization on each end, simulation, modeling, whatever it is. To me, it doesn't matter. The problem is scale, and how does this scale? And that's one of the reasons why I really like what we're doing with Panasas is because I can get that scalability that I haven't had than before. So we start seeing these problems where data is in flight, it's in motion, it's coming at us in near real time, if not real time. Then you throw any form of the edge into this, and my golly, do we have a big, wonderful problem to solve. The problem is people that need to see that information or access it or get on top of it seems to be getting farther away from the data. And I don't remember who it said, maybe it was you, that said gravity, data gravity. Absolutely one of the biggest problems out there right now. It's not only the gravity, but it's the people, the eyeballs on target, so to speak. So, you know, you've got to optimize it. You got to get it operationalized. You've got to optimize. You got to orchestrate it, and you've got to have an actual best practices around data. You just can't say HPC or AI, and then I'll throw the data into it. It has to be data-centric, data first. And so we've been working a lot with Panasas around how to do that. And some of our bigger wins right now has been in the area of breaking what my daddy did and what my granddaddy did and what my great granddaddy did. And that's it. Oh, I got /scratch out there. Oh, I got /home, and then I got /something else, /archive, /prod, something else out there. And I see that that actually hinders us to create a common data model across the organization. That hinders us when the deluge of data really starts coming. You think it's coming now? It's really coming. And then if you want to give access to it just in time to that, it hinders you when you start hearing this data. So one of the beauties that I see that we've been able to develop and use with, especially in the life sciences, but we've also done it in advanced manufacturing and else places, is it doesn't matter. You don't create these false tiers. It can be fast, small block, go, 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 to medium size, to actually those things called spinning rust or HDD. So we're very excited about the future of that roadmap and where things are going. And at the end of the day, I think there has to be a better democratization, demystifying this and then democratizing the data. And we think that we're just at the beginning. So thanks. That's where we're at. Glad to be here. Long live life sciences. Cheers.
Okay. So I'll put the next slide up. Thanks, Earl. That was awesome.
Hey, Bob, we lost our connection. I'm going to check something.
Okay. We can hear you from here, for sure.
All right, can we do a sound check?
Can you hear us from Panasas in San Diego? Can you? Yep. Let me stop sharing so we can see you guys. Hope everyone at home is enjoying a cold one too.
Well,
So,
my name is Kevin.
All right, Kevin. Yeah, we're gonna bring up your slides now. Thanks, Kevin.
No worries.
Awesome.
No worries. So
Bear
I'm the
with
senior
me
vice
here.
president of the Strategic Solutions Group at Penguin Computing. Penguin Computing, as our 20-year-old startup, originally started as a white box Linux provider, moved into HPC, and since then we've grown to follow the trends that we've been talking about today to become a full-service technical compute provider. A lot of the things that we're talking about are the trends we've been seeing in the market, and we're just echoing what the rest of the team said here. And I think the key is data-driven workloads, and how do you address those? So one of the things that we've also seen is a hardware abstraction, and that's what we spoke about from the cloud. That cloud-first model that allowed a lot of organizations to move to the cloud actually pushed us to focusing on the actual workload and capabilities.
So you lose the ability to understand the hardware, or you really actually want to focus on the capabilities delivered by that cloud system. But as we get that, you start to lose some of the fine tuning and specialization required. So that leads us to platform complexity. And that speaks to what Ari said earlier. HPC is about extracting, or HPC and life sciences now is about extracting information from data and generating more data and then abstracting information from it. So it's very cyclical in how HPC, AI, analytics, everything needs to work together. But as we do this and the algorithms get better, you actually, and with the waning of or approaching Moore's law, you get a specialization of the hardware. So you have hardware that's geared towards GPUs, FPGAs. They become what we actually need to do to accelerate the science. So with that hardware abstraction, you're getting end users that want to just accelerate the science, decrease my time to insight. So that puts a lot of pressure back on technology providers and vendors. And that's why we actually all collaborate together, just like scientists do. So we work with Panasas, we work with WWT. We actually have a community of how to drive the underlying technologies, but deliver them in an architecture that enable us to deliver the data-driven workloads. So for us, we see the importance of that as software-defined architectures. You see that software-defined data center. That is very key to keeping up with the level of algorithms being changed, the amount of data being collected, moving, and to what Earl talked about, it's actually being able to operate on that data where it is, where it's generated from the core data center out to the edge. And then that complexity allows us, or makes it where we need to be able to have a platform that addresses all these. And BioTeam gave a good example of how you need everything from on-premises all the way to public cloud. And that kind of leads us to where we are with Cloud 2.0. Our Cloud 1.0 was really cloud first. A lot of people wanted to move to the cloud. What we see now is, there's a cost barrier that allows you not to go into the cloud. There's also what's appropriate for my workload and what's appropriate for my data security. So now we're moving to an area where it's cloud appropriate. In doing so, there's going to be some level that's on premises, some level out in the cloud, and then some level of multi-cloud. So how do we be able to address those is one of the things that Penguin's looking at, and working with key partners like everyone here to understand the true science, be able to speak with BioTeam and understand what's the accelerating algorithms, but also understand what's that infrastructure underneath. And one other thing that we've seen is a flexible usage model. By doing cloud appropriate, that means I need to be able to deliver that solution on premises. I need to be able to deliver it up in the cloud, but as a organization, I need to consume it, and from a business perspective, in a single way, in a single pane of glass. So having the ability to go through and work with a specific partner and be able to manage my workloads, manage my budget, all with on-premises, public cloud, and private cloud together is what we see as one of the real challenges. And working with the masses in terms of our data practice, we feel like starting there and really understanding that data gravity problem and what solutions can map those data workflows will help us deliver more value back to our end customers in the market. So that's kind of what we're working on at Penguin.
You're a closer, man. You did it.
Good job.
All right.
Okay, next. Ready?
Yep.
Okay. This is you, Adam.
Thanks, Bob. My name is Ari Marko. I'm Director of Life Sciences for Panasas. If you don't know Panasas, we're a parallel file system, high-performance parallel file system vendor. And first thing I would like to say is thank you to all the speakers for doing so much content in one slide and 5 minutes on the dot for everyone. Pretty impressive. And everything they said actually ties in pretty well with what I'm going to talk about. I've been in life sciences for a while, over 15 years, and I've made good decisions and bad decisions. I've seen people make good decisions and bad decisions. And a lot of the decisions we make are for the wrong reasons. So I came up with a term called research costs of ownership, or RCO. And it's actually something we've all thought of consciously or subconsciously, but I think it really deserves its own name. And what it is the effective system downtime on research productivity. When you're making decisions, people look at TCO or ROI, they look at dollars per terabyte, they take two spreadsheets and pick the one, or two quotes, pick the one with the lowest number and go with that. But RCO is not TCO, it's not ROI, it's not a simple financial calculation. It's what is going to happen if the decision I make isn't best for my organization. And there's three groups that I like to evaluate when you're thinking about RCO: the researchers, IT, and leadership. What happens if a poor infrastructure decision affects any one of these groups? So researchers, it really comes out to research outcomes. And in academia and in industry as well, publications are a huge deal. So are grant deadlines, and of course, so are collaborations, as well as project deadlines for things like drug discovery projects. Are you willing to accept a reduced number of publications because of saving a few dollars per terabyte on your infrastructure? These are the things we don't always consider, but if we did, we could improve our research outcomes of an organization. Or your IT staff, we all have annual goals. We all have things that we're expected to do. And we have these daily responsibilities. When you're taken away from those daily responsibilities because of unplanned downtime, that affects everything else. You can't plan for the unplanned. So how do you build that into someone's schedule? Do you just plan on working a few nights and weekends every month as a surprise? That's not something anybody wants to do. As far as leadership, you need to think about things like the cost of reduced staff productivity. As I said earlier, are you okay saving a few dollars per terabyte to have 20% less publications per year? What are the effects of a poor infrastructure decision on the outcomes, on the research goals of your organization? This community is fairly small. We all talk to each other. We all know each other, and big failures propagate pretty quickly. So another thing that I don't know that leadership always considers is what's the reputation to their organization if they lose staff because they didn't deploy the correct infrastructure, or if their infrastructure completely fails and other organizations find out about it. The point is, you can't make a decision simply based on the dollars. If you do that, you lose sight of what the real goal of your organization is. And this doesn't mean commercial versus open source. It means evaluating the options through having a discussion. So the way to start using RCO is really talking to your people. Talk to the researchers, your users. Talk to your IT staff. See what's bothering them, what they like and what they don't like. And talk to your leadership about their tolerance for failure or their outcomes, their outcome goals. It's not as simple as, like I said, taking those two quotes or taking a spreadsheet and picking the lowest number. You really need to think long-term, how's this going to affect my organization? And in the life sciences, outcomes of life scientists in the life science organizations affect all of us globally, not just those of us working in the organization. And I think we're more aware of that now than ever before. So that wraps up my slide, and we're going to turn it over to Christian, who will be joining us remotely from, I believe, Toronto.
Yeah, just a little town outside of Toronto called Paris, Ontario. I know there's a Paris, Texas, so I'm from Paris, Ontario today. I got a nice tap room in the back, but I would love obviously to sit with the crowd at Lazarus as well. So quick sound check, is the sound okay?
You sound great.
Excellent, good.
Way better than Austin.
So we all think of beer in different ways. You're in a great beer environment, you're in an amazing brewery, tasting amazing beer. And actually behind the scenes, behind the curtains, in terms of research and innovation, there's a tremendous amount of amazing work that's going on. So I'm just doing a little sheep dip today in touching on topics. So just to, wet your whistle in terms of what more is there to actually create amazing product. So a lot of research focus these days is just like with any other consumer products on nutrition, zero alcohol beers, sustainable packaging, which is a big issue for the brewers. And, there are developments now to develop a cardboard package think of a cardboard beer bottle that's recyclable, but it can also hold carbonated drinks. Flavor through fermentation. So you heard it earlier from Matt talking about he's really hurting the yeast. The yeast is really generating a lot of the flavor profile. So therefore, lots of activity in that research area. Raw materials, alternative raw materials, climate change, as you can imagine, plays into that. Process improvements, both on the continuous process improvement side, but also on transformational stuff. So how do we make beer in 30, 40 years from now when maybe there is a shortage of, barley or wheat because it's used for food stuff only? Water has become a scarcity and will continuously be a challenge going forward. And in the brewing process, you need quite a lot of water to do that. The carbon footprint, etc. Where it's getting really interesting is what I call the holy grail of drinkability. So how do you write the #1 hit single? How do you create a beer that just is amazing? It's not easy. Lots of research, and the answer is not in anybody's pocket because it's a natural product and the flavor profile keeps on changing. Raw materials keep on changing, but there are attempts. There's lots of research, and some brewers know it better than others how I create that moorishness, that drinkability. Low carb, so back to the nutritional functionality, and then obviously a lot of process optimization, Industry 4.0. And obviously in a brewery, you don't have this amazing data processing that you talked about in your earlier slides. But brewers starting to network and link every element in the brewery to data collection to make better decisions, both for the large one, but as well for smaller breweries, regional breweries that just need to be smart about how to do things. Now, let's jump to the core ingredients and what's happening in the core ingredients of brewing. Water is a key thing, hops, yeast, and then obviously the grains, yeah? And grains are used, differently in different countries. Some use maize, corn, sorghum, barley, wheat, and you name it. There's a real race going on to find other forms of carbohydrate sources. Now, let's start with the hops. We talked earlier about how unique hops is. There's a lot of breeding programs ongoing, and hops cannot be genetically modified. So it's classic breeding and genetic crossbreeding that takes its time. And in the Yakima Valley in Oregon, Washington, etc., there's now over 180 different hop varieties, where 20 years ago there were maybe 10. So a real research breakthrough in how to breed faster, get to the results quicker. And it's about new flavors, citrusy, pineapple, raspberry, etc. And that's not flavor additions you throw into the beer. It comes naturally through the hops, which is really fascinating. Other applications for food preservation. Hops is naturally antibacteriostatic and it preserves. And you can actually use hops to preserve jams. You can use it for other products. It's totally natural. It doesn't have to be through the beer. Something I'm doing on my own farm, where I have 60 beehives. You can have hop strips in front of the beehive, and actually the fine hop dust goes on the bee, and the bee actually will not get sick from that fungus and the little insects that can sit on bees and kills a lot of bees. The hop oils, the different formats, encapsulation of hop oils and maybe oak chips to use that in the brewing process. So tons of innovation going on in that space. And then also in terms of functionality, which is always a bit hard to argue when you also consume alcohol, but there's a lot of high-end polyphenols, tannins, very healthy stuff. Remember, apple a day keeps the doctor away. That's the skin really of the apple. Hops has a ton of that, and one of the key components is xanthohomolone, and lots of research in that space. If I jump to grains, so the cereals, is look into alternative grains, both from a marketing innovation perspective, but also from a future supply. I was brewing in Africa, ran the biggest breweries there, and I used sorghum as my main ingredient. I had over 4,000 farmers providing sorghum, happens to be also gluten-free. Removing of staling compounds in breeding programs. So the shelf life of beer comes a lot from, or is dependent on particular reactions that happens in the malting and in the growing process of barley. If you can breed your barley differently, you can remove those compounds that age, and you get a better shelf life, fresher beer, better drinkability, etc. And then obviously all the varieties that you can plant for climate change. Lastly, I want to talk about yeast. Very, very fascinating. And you may or may not know, but till the microscope was invented, till somebody actually figured out pathways of fermentation. The brewers for the longest did not know actually where the alcohol came from. Yeah, there was this funky stuff that was on the bottom of the fermentation tank of your bottle, and it did something, but you never really know what it did. So yeast makes the alcohol, it makes heat, it creates the CO2, the carbonation, but a lot of different flavors. So there's a lot of research going on. There are yeast strains now, natural yeast strains, where you can produce zero alcohol beer. So it's still fermenting, it tastes like a real beer, lots of research, lots of applications going on. You can also breed a yeast that actually produces CBD, even THC. You can have a yeast that actually glows in the dark. So all of these things can happen. There are companies and research going on in terms of, is that a more natural form and actually using the yeast, which is fundamentally a fungus, to create all of that. Alcohol tolerance, you want to brew super strong beers, or you want to brew beers that survive in high % of alcohols. Biotransformation of hop aromas. The yeast works very closely with the hops, and now there's a deeper understanding that I can get different flavors out of hops when it reacts with the chemical reactions that the yeast has with the hops. And lastly, sour beers. And the example I want to leave with you, we work closely with the University of Philadelphia, and we foraged a yeast strain together with the university. We found it in the gardens actually of the university, and that yeast first ferments the alcohol, makes a regular beer, and then in day 3 it kicks its pathway, and it actually produces lactic acid and propionic acid and creates a sour beer. So this is unheard of. This is not a GMO mutated yeast. This is a natural strain. It's an Achantia, it's not a Saccharomyces, but it creates amazing sour beers that you can do in the product. So that's my short snapshot, my sheep dip into what's going on the beer world. It will forever stay an exciting product, and I'm in that for the last 35 years, and I'm as passionate as day one. Cheers.
Hey, thanks, Christian. Let me stop sharing my screen. We actually have a question that came in, and it's a tough question. Let me see if I can bring it up again. And I think there's someone on the panel that would probably know this more than anyone else, considering the two different fields it touches. So the question is, curious why hops can't be genetically engineered. Is it a ploidy problem or something similar?
It's a good question. I mean, ultimately, it can be genetically engineered. The nature of the Humulus lupulus of the hop plant is that you can achieve a lot of what you want to achieve easier with breeding programs. Yeah, so it's partially the nature of this botanical plant, but it's also with the crossbreeding and with the selection, you can get to the results fairly quickly. Barley equally. Barley is not easily GMO modified. And that's again the same thing. You have selective breeding programs, and you can put stress on the breeding examples in order to actually generate different traits in the varieties that you grow.
Awesome. Okay. Any other discussion? Because I've got some questions coming in. If you want me to handle those for you, Adam.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, did you want to add something, Aaron?
Yeah, I can add one thing to that. One of the reasons why it's hard to genetically engineer grains is because their genome is incredibly complex and has a whole lot of repeating sequences all the way through it. Wheat is one of the worst. Corn is next. Barley is right up there with it, and also hops and cannabis are sort of the same way. So there's multiploidy problems there, and trying to genetically engineer that, you're not until we can really sequence all those genomes, which we just did wheat not too long ago. It's hard to know where to target.
Awesome. Hey, and just to make sure, I'm not sure where the microphone is, but make sure the microphone's near you. And then Ari, you're the one I actually thought of, because aren't you, besides a PhD geneticist, bioinformatics person, aren't you also a home brewer?
You're right. I am a home brewer in addition to molecular biologist.
Yes, there you go. So here's another one. Oh, it's a long one. Let me read it. Cloud bursting sounds great in theory. We only want to burst HPC jobs into the cloud where we don't need to move a lot of data into it. Time for data transfer costs. You suggested AI for making such decisions. Are there any viable solutions available yet? We don't use cloud bursting exactly for this reason. In the end, we always come back to on-prem. Ray, maybe I missed it, but how did you solve this problem in your private cloud for genomics?
Well, it depends on the, it all depends on the data set, right? So in this scenario, you've got custom software developers developing the applications, and depending on how they leverage that and push the data up. And as you mentioned, having the data up in a public cloud becomes expensive when you're pulling out big sets of data. And our side here, you're leveraging some of the containerization around singularity containers and the science side of those type of applications that are leveraging some of the internal predictions and algorithms to help with that process.
I can add one more thing. I think that true hybrid cloud has not been super accomplished yet, and it's mostly a data problem. You know, most organizations don't invest in their border networking abilities, and so if you're generating a whole lot of data internally, moving many terabytes or to petabytes of data to and from the cloud, they're going to get really expensive and be super slow, right? So to really utilize cloud as a bursting area, I think that's really not the right way to think about it. I think the right way to think about it is to do application specific or workload specific decisions on where that is. So clouds, each of the major public clouds, some of the more boutique clouds, they all have unique capabilities. And so if you go for adding a capability by what you're doing there, then you don't have to build it on premises, right? And then if you architect the workloads to be able to work that way, so certain data hits, this gets back to my data-centric model, certain data hits, that data just automatically moves to an S3 bucket, for instance. And then, the systems up there will be more operationally effective at operating, using, genomics is a great example. Most genomics applications are embarrassingly parallel. You can divide it up into n number of jobs and it'll go n fast. And that's really what you can do. So I think it's more of a capability you're trying to add. If you go to the cloud for cost, you're going to lose. If you go to the cloud for capability, you're going to win.
Hey, Ari, when you mean capability, are you talking about like specific apps up there or things that are available that they've spun up that's available to people? Is that what you mean by capability, or is it like the availability of a certain hardware, like a GPU instance or something? What do you mean by capability?
It's all of the above.
Okay.
So some of it is that each of the clouds has specific services that are quite a lot faster to deploy than if you built it yourself. And if it's not something that you as an organization do a lot of, it's probably not worth the engineering to build it yourself. So going to the cloud is a great way to do that. If you have a cluster with 300 GPUs and you need 4,000, and you have one user who needs those 4,000 for 3 weeks, it doesn't make sense to build a giant cluster for that. Go to the cloud, right? And so it's a mixture of those things, where it's both hardware, services, application, workloads that fit those services, data size, and also, how you're going to be collaborating and sharing this data, I think are equally important.
Yeah, so adding to that, I think that's where we came in and we approached capability as a workload optimized architecture. And it really is an architecture because it's the hardware and software orchestration underneath the hardware optimized for that workload. And then how does the data workflow work? And that's really going to help you understand, to Ari's point, where this workload is going to run. It's where you can optimize the access and time of transfer or time of access to the data. So two things that we've been looking at to approach that, one from a technical perspective, building a multi-site data fabric. It's never going to, nobody's breaking the speed of light or, changing physics here, but you can have software-defined architectures and hardware workload optimized architectures that allow you to optimally transfer data or do RDMA over WAN or long distances, so I can start to reach in and do some decision making. And those types of things help eliminate the effects of data gravity, but it's a holistic picture that you have to take to design towards that workflow. And then the other side for us, the definition of cloud is going to start changing. It's cloud appropriate. as BioTeam said, they designed a purpose-built private cloud that was less expensive, but that's just a byproduct. They designed it to maximize the workflow. When we look at the flexible usage model, we're going to see an age where if it's a consumption model, it's a business model. So if I can have a cloud on premise, consume it as an OpEx, why would I not have the best of both worlds? It doesn't eliminate that I still may need a public cloud, and that's where we get to the multi-cloud. So unfortunately, there's no one silver bullet, holy grail. It's really going to take approaching and understanding from the data up through the workload to define a optimized architecture. So cloud bursting as a cure-all, we all know kind of really doesn't exist. But I think the key thing here is understanding the data and deriving or kind of deploying a workload optimized architecture.
Totally agree.
Okay. Hey, Adam, your beer is kind of light there. You may want to take care of that. I'm as I'm waiting for some more questions to come in. I have a question for you guys. We're at Panasas, a storage company. Kind of mentioned data in these workflows, and I want to be more specific about it. And I'll bring up one of Ari's colleagues. The trends in the trenches that Devs does, and he talks about all the the explosive growth of data, the fact that ML and AI now are being used on that data. And in the past, this is kind of how I want to frame kind of the discussion. It's not so much a question, but you mentioned that in the recent past, you had to choose between fast storage. This is your NVMe over Fabrics, super blazing fast storage, or big storage. I guess like scale out NAS, Isilons, etc. You really couldn't have big and fast storage at the same time because they would be very expensive. So you have to kind of had made a trade-off in the past. And I was just curious if you see a change there in that paradigm. Is that do you need? Am I correct in asserting? I guess his assertion that moving forward you're going to need big and fast storage, which means kind of big and fast and affordable storage. Because if you had all the money in the world, you could do all that, and some people do. Our friend Glenn Lockwood out at NERSC has like 35 petabytes of all flash, but not everyone can afford that. And I just wanted, to bring the discussion a little bit to the Panasas turf, and ask you guys what are your thoughts on that? Where are you seeing that? And I'll let the discussion begin. Whoever wants to take that.
I'll start since the speaker's in front of me, and Jack's at my company. It's a great point. So I can tell you that I think people want to do that. I don't think people are doing that in general. I think everyone realizes that if you're looking for an end user experience, if you're looking for, if the mission of your organization is science, having 13 tiers is not a great way to get there, right? Fewer tiers with fewer tiers, to quote Glenn Lockwood the other day, is I think important. And what you really are going to do there is actually abstract the underlying infrastructure away from the end user, right? I think that's where we need to go. We need data platforms that utilize fantastic hardware on the backside of it, maybe some tiering, but next generation architectures, which I consider Panasas one of them. They tend to be able to scale with speed and with storage space as well. But that's not where this ends. I think the biggest problem in our field is actually data citizenship, and Chris Stack talks about this, which is that the scientists need to take ownership and accountability for how much data they produce and keep, and get rid of the stuff that they don't. The problem right now is that a lot of people have no idea what the value of their data is. And so if you start to understand the value of your data, you realize that keeping all those, raw genome files that come off of sequencers is completely useless, and they're never reused. They just spin on rust forever and cost, $28 a day per genome to sit there, which gets really, really expensive. So, so I think it's a combination of problems, kind of like COVID. It's complex, but I think there's a variety of ways with that.
Sure.
Frankly, I was tired of my mask and I just wanted to get it off. I'll never know what comes out here, but
Hey, you do sound a lot better with the mask off. That was a good.
okay.
Yeah.
So I tend to think that certain industries or domains are getting there faster than other domains, and I would think, don't shoot me, but I think life sciences in ways is farther behind than some of the other domains. Yeah, and so when I go over to manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, even the boys in oil and gas and things like that, utilities, oh no, they're way behind. Sorry about that. But you look at that, and they're coming to the realization that they need to, whether we call it collapsing the tiers or whatever it is, they want to keep it simple, stupid, and they want one network. They want one interconnect solution to this. So now I've got InfiniBand sitting over there, and now I got Ethernet over here, or I got Rocky 2 sitting over there with somebody else over there, and long-lived fiber channel, okay, or whatever that's called. And that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And so a lot of folks, somewhat driven by the IT, but it's driven by the skills shortage, in my opinion. There's a huge skills shortage problem because for some reason people like to do Facebook and not HPC. I don't know why. I think we're in the sexiest damn business ever, and they're all messed up.
But they're being paid. They're being paid millions.
Oh, I forgot about that. Okay, I do it because I love this. Anyway, well, I'm an alchemist. I can make, straw into gold and all that kind of stuff, right? So I do believe that we can do both performance, price performance, okay, things that not necessarily haven't been said here, but are important to hear is that resiliency sits there, okay? I don't have to keep worrying about, am I going to get that call in the middle of the night? And because of the skills shortage, it's keep it simple. It's the KISS principle and making it easy. And that's what Panasas does for me right now. So, thanks.
Hey, thanks for that. That was a great thing. But I did want to follow up on that. They made this skills shortage, battle for talent. It's actually it was on a question I was going to ask later. The top 3 challenges I've seen out there. And I was going to ask you guys the same thing, but I wanted to follow. And one of them was the battle for talent. And I wanted to ask you guys that. And again, I'm going to come back to Ari first because, in a sense, I think you're. Correct me if I'm wrong. Your whole organization is to help other organizations that are maybe short of certain talent, and you come in and augment that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but can you comment on that? Is the battle for talent a big deal in this space?
In this space specifically, yes. So we don't augment so much as help organizations figure out how to take ownership of what they need, including skill sets and including re-architecting their IT to actually serve their mission rather than to serve IT. It's not a knock on IT, it's just the way IT thinks. They don't really think about what they're doing. They get a list of requirements and they build a thing to make that work, to your point earlier. So the talent shortage, I think, exists in cross-functionality. And people who understand a lot of different areas of one, maybe broadly, but maybe also deeply, and can do things like think about how the network affects storage, because it does, right? And think about things like how your scheduler is going to affect the cloud, because it might, right? And do things like how your identity and access management system is going to allow you to save money on how much storage you get, because you're dealing with access management in certain ways, right? And so the problem actually is a diversity in experience. When you go out there and are trained in sort of typical IT organizations, everything is super siloed. All these organizations are very, very separated. They don't talk to each other. They don't think about each other. One of the things that always baffles me is how separated security and network are. They're the same thing. They are actually the same thing, just slightly different views on it, but they're completely separate in most organizations. And they both inhibit each other, basically. And so, I think the deal is really getting that cross-functionality. And I think where HPC specifically is different is that it is a convergence of all of those technologies to yield a capability for an organization. Interdisciplinary, yeah, that's right.
Mm.
And then add science into that, which is really what we're talking about, right? And that's where it gets super complicated, because you really got to have some notion of what you're trying to do with it. You know, I think, you know, Kevin and Earl, they both said this earlier, which is that, you know, why are you building this? Use case driven architecture. Okay, that's sort of a whole new way of thinking.
Hey, it looks like, correct me if I'm wrong, we're at 3:30 here on the West Coast. Is our time up, Adam? Is it an hour session?
We can go a little bit longer if there's still people on the call.
Yeah, there's still people on. I did have, I was going to propose this as a rapid question, but if we want to keep going, we can. You know, I'm out here in San Diego, and you know, we consider ourselves a craft brewing center, as I'm sure Austin does too. But you know, there's a community of craft brewers out here. As you guys know, it's a very community thing. In fact, both here, the founder of kind of the start of the movement out here, one of the biggest ones is Greg Koch, and then he's not related to the one that everyone probably knows, Sam Adams out there in Boston, Jim Koch. And both these guys have been known for, you know, they really generously spent a lot of their time, shared their knowledge, invested, gave money, and you probably know this in the beer community, to help other people start up. So much so, like out here in San Diego, Stone Brewery, that the guy that did all this stuff actually has had to have cutbacks and reductions, because he basically enabled all this competition. And you know, it's great for the community and great for him, and I mean great for the consumers. But barring that, I just wanted to you know, that community aspect of craft brewing and how to tie that into to what you guys are doing. Can the panel talk at all about how the community, including just you guys at the start, can collaborate to improve some of the problems that we're seeing out there? Is that happening? Are we cooperating, or are we competing? And how can we do that better in the spirit of the craft brewers out there? And maybe Christian can comment on my observation there first.
It's a great, what I would call, provocation. It's not easy to answer, because you have two dynamics, right? So you have the liquid lubricant. Here's the liquid lubricant, and you've got the community builder, which is your local community brewery or more than one. And then the other side, you're in consumer goods. You're competing, right? And consumer goods are heavily competing. So you've got this rubbing in this direction, the rubbing in the other way. I think what is super important for the health of communities is that you have your local baker, you have your local variety store, you have microcosmos. And I think what the breweries do really well is they create this microcosmos of well-being. You know the brewer, right? Like you guys all said, the Lazarus, the brewer came in, he talks to you. So this whole humility thing, the whole human aspect, the whole aspect of connecting, engaging, empathy. So it's very much a soft element. I think where technology can help, where computing can help, is understanding data, right? So the biggest challenge for brewers is understanding your customers, understanding specific data that you have in your LIMS system, your laboratory information system, or that borderline between art and science of brewing. So how to interpret data. So I throw it back to the panel that are, very much into data and what to do with data and all of that. So I could see the opportunities in enabling smarter data understanding and what to do with that.
Hey, thanks, Christian. Hey, back to the panel.
Adam,
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Bob.
So I was going to, just to maybe focus it a little bit. We mentioned data before, and I know, going back to the discussion as far as data hygiene, things like standardizing metadata in life sciences. I don't know where that's happening, if it's happening. Are people collaborating along those lines? Is the NIH, for example, providing leadership there? Does anyone, is everyone, every institution have to march to DAG's orders independently, or is there a community that's formed to do this, or is there an opportunity for that?
I feel like I've been talking too much, sorry. So NIH is starting to take a leadership position on this. NIH is an organization, they're one of our biggest customers. NIH as an organization tends not to be a standards organization. They tend to be, to enable research through funding and, direction on, from Congress and others about what needs to happen. But recently they've been spending a lot of effort, and we've been working with them on creating a more unified data ecosystem for biomedicine and life science healthcare. And part of this is it's trying to figure out how you bind together, to your point earlier, the newest, youngest science who's generating almost as much data as any other science on the planet currently, where other sciences like oil and gas and astronomy and high energy physics had to figure this out 30 years ago, right? So we're just figuring this out. So does life sciences have standards? Yes, there's just 38 of them, and no one can agree on which one to use, right? And so, it's kind of all over the place, and everyone thinks they're right, and that's the problem. And so one of the concepts that we've been working with is not a new concept, but the idea of a data commons, where the idea is to collapse data using sort of global unique identifiers and a minimal set of common data elements. So this is your common metadata. You can't unify everyone's metadata because experiments are all going to be different, and sometimes they need a different set of metadata. But if you have common data elements that are relatable across different metadata systems, then you can at least analyze them on the same plane. So it is starting to kick in. There's massive projects through the Office of Data Science Strategy at NIH that are doing this both internally to NIH and extramurally for the world.
I want to mention one thing
Sure.
here. So one of the things that I see, and this is maybe more of a question to you guys, in the life sciences. So I mentioned one of the things that whether IDC or whatever puts up the chart and there's 175 zettabytes and everything else. But I said I think they missed something. What I think they missed is the metadata, or the metadata, the meta information associated with that. And so when I go over in the intelligence world and everything else, 1 petabyte of data generates 100 to 300 to 500 petabytes of metadata. Okay. Oil and gas, a little bit less, 10 to 1 or 20 to 1, something like that. In life sciences, I think it could be astronomically huge, the amount of metadata that can be associated with just 1 petabyte of data.
Yeah, that's possible. The truth is we don't know.
Yeah.
Okay? Analytic pipelines have data expansion, right, which carries metadata on top of it, so you can track what's going where, right? But we don't know, because the consolidation of metadata, of really scientifically relevant information about the data you're storing, it's really just in its infancy.
So you could say it's probably going to grow without it.
Yeah, for sure. But if you do it in a more coordinated way, it won't grow quite as much, which is good.
Until I add a new instrument.
And what?
A new instrument.
A new instrument, yeah, which happens every other week right now. Exactly. So, yeah. Anyone else want to add?
Hey, Adam, I have a question for you on your RCO slide. And the question is the solution simply, buying commercial products, like NetApps and Isolons to make sure things don't fall over?
Yeah, but quickly, Bob, for those on the call who might have to jump off, would you be able to show the last slide just so they know the contact information?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
If they have follow-up questions.
Yeah, let me do that, and then we'll come back to you. share my screen. And all right, that's right here. And
So just if you have life science questions for anybody on the panel, contact me at amarko@panasas.com. I'll triage it. And then if you have general questions about Panasas offerings, send it to info@panasas.com. Just wanted to get that out there because I know some of you are probably have to head out. But back to your question, Bob, is the solution to RCO only commercial solutions? We're all for-profit organizations here, so I'm sure we would love for you to go with us to help improve your RCO, but that's not always an option. I've used open source myself many times. I have some open source products at home. The thing about open source is it's easy to become an expert in it as an individual and get used to that. And because you're used to it, you think that's the best. What's best for IT admin and the maintenance staff might not be what's best for the researchers. So this comes back to really having those important, difficult conversations with your users to make sure that what you're running, even though you like it, is meeting their needs. So that's applicable to commercial solutions and it's applicable to open source as well.
okay. Hey, I think it's a good time to wrap up. You actually are starting to break up a little bit there. And I just want to thank everybody. I know maybe I should just let Adam do all this because he was the person that brought all this together there in Austin. It's amazing that so much, in addition to beer making talent, so much life science processing talent is all there in one place. You know, hats off to you guys. And why don't I turn it over to you, Adam, to why don't you close us out?
All right, thanks, Bob, and thanks to our presenters. We fit a ton of information in a very compressed time. And I appreciate everybody who was able to join in this semi-virtual live streaming event. So reach out to us with any more questions and enjoy the rest of supercomputing.
And thanks, Christian, also from Canada. Thanks.
All right.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.